how did you get into leadership in the first place, and what's your journey?
I started off as a developer, was an okay developer, but I really enjoyed it.
And what problem you started to see in delivery space?
Challenge was the project managers and product administrators and PMO would spend 75 to 90% just collating the information.
Hey, and welcome to the Change Leaders Playbook, bringing you all things delivery leadership in a podcast. I'm Cliff, an experienced leader of change initiatives with a passion for the teams and the businesses that are changing the game. Now, if you work on projects and want to know how AI can streamline your work, this is the episode for you. I'm joined today by Jora GiIl, former CEO at the Standards & Poor's, former CTO at the Economist, and current CEO of ConnectingYouNow, which is a secure enterprise AI hub with intelligent search and data analysis all in one groundbreaking platform. We'll talk about his leadership background, project management pain points, and much more. So let's get into it. Welcome, Jora.
Many thanks, Cliff. Good to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Fabulous. I'd love to start by finding out a bit more about you, your background. How did you get into the role that you're in now? How did you get into leadership in the first place? And what's your journey in a nutshell?
Yes, so I started my career very much similarly to a lot of your audience members. I started off as a developer, was an okay developer. No, I wouldn't call myself fantastic, but I really enjoyed it. About a 3-month period where I was on, we just released a product. I used to work in an investment bank and I was taking first line calls. That was a real eye opener because, I started talking to business people. This was an internal product and really hearing about their problems and their challenges and then feeding that back to the team, going, you know what, we've got these great features, but, we've got these gaps in our features as well. That sort of communication and understanding has sort of lived with me throughout my career. And the general curiosity of how do we know we've got the right product? How do we know we're solving the right solution? Who's it for? How do they use it? What's their pain points? So anyway, that led to me in my first project management role, very small team, a team of 4 of us. But again, the focus was more on what we're not going to do rather than what we are going to do. So we had a very long list. This is all pre-agile, really waterfall. And we can touch on that if you ever want to. But we had a really long list, but we spent a lot of time just sort of sitting with the actual end users, watching how they use their current systems and then feeding it back. And that was very successful project. It led me to manage larger project teams. So I managed teams of 30 and 40. And then I became a program manager, and then I became a divisional technology leader inside of this bank. And then I joined a ratings agency called Standard & Poor's as their CTO, which was brilliant. So now I'm combining technology, product, business, and technology vision. And they were really going through a data transformation. So data started playing a big part. Things like data lakes started coming into action. That was successful. And then I thought, hang on, my career's been in finance, investment banking, and financial ratings. I wonder if I could apply the same technology skills to a different industry. So I became CTO of Relics, or Reed Elsevier as it was back then, which is a big B2B publisher, multi-billion revenue per year. And they were going through a massive transformation where they were creating building blocks for their futures. They always used to think like 5-10 years ahead. I know IT projects sometimes be very focused on the now. They were going, okay, we want to not be a publisher. We want to be a content search engine. To do that, we have to have all these capabilities in place. So it was hard work, but it was successful. Their share price is doing really well, and they now describe themselves more as a software company than a publisher. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I've done that, but I've never done B2C. I wonder if B2C is a different animal when it comes to technology. So then I was lucky enough to join The Economist as the chief digital officer. And again, it was a massive transformation. The Economist had a lot of newer entrants and existing entrants that we had to focus on. So that was a great gig and a real privilege privilege. And then I thought to myself, I've never been a non-executive. Why are there no non-executives, IT leadership non-executives on board? So when you look at boards, the background usually comes from CEOs, CFOs, or MDs, maybe sales and marketing, more marketing, but not many technology. I think I was quoted a stat just a few weeks ago that on FTSE boards, there's only 10% of leaders on technology. I can go into, what the feedback I've learned or why that is, or what I've been told. So now I sit on the board of Travis Perkins. You may see our trucks on your high street. And I also sit on Beanit, who own Sun Life and Standard Life and Reassure, huge pension and life organization with massive data, massive transformation. And then finally, I started ConnectingYouNow because I could see this recurring problem. And I was started my life as part of that community. And I wanted to come back and serve the community I started at.
That's a pretty extensive resume for sure. I'm wondering how you find the time to take on those roles as well as ConnectingYouNow. So do you want to talk a bit about ConnectingYouNow, what problems it's solving and what problems you started to see in the delivery space?
So let me go right back to when I had that small team of 3 and 4 people. All the team was sat, in the same office in London. I would swivel my chair, talk to the engineers, talk to the BA, really understand what was going on. Later on, when I was, at the Economist and Relic, I'd sort of, swivel my chair and there'd be some thousand people in my team. And I was like, so what's going on? And people were just giving multiple versions of their lens into what was going on. And what I realized was we've got large teams that are quite disparately spread now. I mean, these days, post-COVID, a number of people are working from home, but we had teams in Europe, we had teams in India, businesses in the US. So we had this sort of disparate set of information coming into us in a disparate set of teams. And the challenge was the project managers and product administrators and PMO would spend 75 to 90% just collating the information. And the real crunch of, you and your listeners know, is the decisions you make during the project where you're continually course correcting on a project. But it would take so long just to collate the information. By the time you were making the decision, the data was almost, out of date because things had moved on so quickly. And so we started ConnectingYouNow going, what about if you could get all the information in 30 seconds? What if you could take, days and days of collating information into 30 seconds? And then the next page was, the how. And then we created these crawlers that could crawl across. Most technologists that I've been working with over the last few years use Slack as a messaging tool. They use Jira as their sort of engineering and backlog tool. They use SharePoint or G Drive where they hold documentation. They have separate QA systems. So I said, what about if we could just crawl all of this information on a regular basis and just bring it together in a central AI repository that was searchable? So that was the first challenge that ConnectingYouNow looked to solve. So the second part of ConnectingYouNow is a two-way conversational engine. So you could put into ConnectingYouNow, now you've amassed all this data, you could put things in, where do you see the risks in this project? And it will go through Jira, people have had risks, it will collate it all in. But then it'll ask you a question. Are you looking for security risk? Looking for technology risk? Are you looking for milestone risks? What sort of risk are you looking for? And then it may say, well, okay, the biggest risk is we do not have enough UX people. So we've got lots of engineers and they're just sitting there waiting because the flow from UX to the engineering team is a bit slow. So then you pinpoint that and then you start looking into and talking with the teams going, okay, have we got the right shape of team? And are we in the right phase that we need all these engineers or do we just build a bit of cycle time just to create a backlog for UX? But it allows you to do that because you can now have a single version of the truth. And then the final bit of the product and the analytics is the question you asked earlier was, where do you see the risk of this project? The next question, logically, of an AI assistant, and that's what ConnectingYouNow is, a technology project AI system. How would you mitigate those risks? And then it reviews that, looks at the internal data, and it then says, I would recommend you do this, this, and this. Now, that's not a single answer, but that's another view for the team going, hey, look, the AI is saying it should do this. Do we disagree? Are we looking at something else? Or is our data not updated? So that's what ConnectingYouNow is there, is to get you information in 30 seconds really understand where your risks are, mitigate those risks, course correct, and start all over again.
Well, I think you pretty much hit a real sweet spot in terms of pain points that project teams and even program leaders have as well, which is effectively aggregating information in a concise manner to inform timely decisions. And the ability to be able to do that is going to be massive. And I'm sure you're seeing success in terms of the uptake and the interest around that. I'm looking forward to trying it myself, actually, if that's all right with you. I think it's going to be brilliant. I think there's a lot there too about the time. So you're right, from my experience as well, a lot of time has been taken and can be taken, literally hours, coordinating and organizing reports, which then are very quickly out of date. So to be able to get that at your fingertips in a concise manner, get decisions made and review that as regularly as possible to get the right level of information, that I can imagine that's saving a lot of time and then enabling the teams to actually be more productive to focus their efforts in the right area. So I don't know whether you're seeing that as well within your clients. There's real value there to be had for project team.
Yeah, no, I think time is if you did a spider diagram of Project Cliff, when people put their risks in front of me, I almost know the risk before they put them in front of me at the beginning of a project. It's going to be, scope may not be understood. We may not have the right resources, sort of have this legacy technology that we don't understand. We may have the new, they sort of look at it going, okay, those are all valid risks, but we don't really know those risks until we start the project. I think this is where Agile was trying to come in, like, let's start small and start something. But usually, you're not really finding out, and a lot of people don't spike the risks up the front. I don't know your experience, but I found they don't. They do the easy stuff initially, get some wins, tell me about their story points burning down really nicely, and then it stops and it goes green, 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 red. And I go, why did it go red? And where was Amber? And they said, over the last 2 weeks, we've just discovered this big issue. But that issue was always there. It just wasn't seen. And time had then passed to course correct that issue. So it's gone red because there's a point of no return in project. So once you've reached that point of no return, you need more money, you need more budget, or you need a reduction in scope. And that's a red. Any of those are, unless it's, slight reduction, it's fine. If you're totally course correcting and taking must-have features off, that's a red. Because the business then are like, hang on, we've just sold these capabilities to our customers and now you're telling us you can't build that in time. So I think, but if you could, within that time, if you could see that clearly, you can have those grown-up discussions with business leaders. You can tell the team, okay, you're focused on the wrong things right now. Let's just really engage in priorities 1, 2, and 3. 6 and 7 are important, but we'll deal with those later. So that time to make decision is crucial. And then, lastly, on this point, actually involving everybody. Steering committees, for me, on the whole, and hope your audience doesn't take this wrong way, is a waste of time because steering committees are there, not for a status update. They're a place you take in your status, you take in your information, and steering committees are made up of senior leaders who are able to make decisions. Steering committees are usually let down when I talk to the committee members going, they weren't really sharing this information until it was too late, and you burnt through that time. And then steering committees like, so what do you want us to do now? We're sort of 7 months into a 9-month project. We can't steer you any longer. So I think time is the crucial element.
Really, really good what you said about steering committees. I've definitely been part of steering committees at various levels and have seen a lot of that happen. But I would also say that those steercos are kind of what you make of it. The participants definitely need to be aware of what's needed from them and when it's needed from them. But of course, the right information needs to be available to them at the right time. And I think it's right what you said about they're there to steer, which really means that the day-to-day data that's required and is valuable is important for the core team. So if they've got the right information at their fingertips, it helps them to be able to take proactive decisions without the need to wait for steering committees for big decisions, and also be able to be in a position where information that's needed at a steering level can be given earlier rather than later. So that sort of information is I think is crucial. It is really important. Having something like ConnectingYouNow, I believe, gives that level of proactivity. And so let's move a little bit into, I think you talked about earlier on, the difference between Agile versus Waterfall. Now, I would argue that there is a need actually for both types of initiatives, even now, both types of methods, especially bearing in mind that different types of changes will require different ways of working, especially if you're building something that's really, really fixed and rigid. It may require some waterfall ways of working, right? So what's your take on it, and how does that thinking informed Connecting You Now?
Yes, I mean, we're a fairly agile team, but we were a startup and now we're a scale up. And initially as a startup, you're constantly pivoting and trying to find product market fit until you find it. And then you use a combination. I think from my perspective as both a NED and CXO, I started off waterfall, then really moved into agile. I was an agile guru and, talked to, all these famous agile people. But I think I've seen over the last 4 years a sort of coming back towards waterfall, but keeping the principles of agile. So it's a combination of both. I think the challenge agile on large ERPs or large CRM transformation migration type projects, or even data center or moving to the cloud projects, that there needs to be a lot of upfront work because you've got a lot of information in your legacy systems that people haven't touched sometimes for 20 years. That really needs to be documented. Needs to be something, I don't know if it's still around, Cliff, something called a functional specification document. Back in the day, they're still there. Excellent. So I would read those and really understand, what are we looking to do? And then after that, we used to create a technical specification document where the architects and the senior engineers would really go like, we really don't know all these risks. Like this code we haven't touched in the legacy system, and you want us to migrate to this brand new shining ERP system. I think for those, you have to be quite careful. I think for those large projects also, and this isn't the fault of technologists, but the finance department and the board really want to know how much it's going to cost. And it's really difficult when you got these big 30 million, 50 million projects, but they're not going to give you the funding for Agile. So I think there's a different way where you can combine both. I think using Agile at the beginning to really understand where the issues could lie, almost like a venture capitalist going back to the C-suite, going, look, we need like 50K, 100K. We need to set up a set of engineers. Otherwise, I'm just navel gazing and giving you an estimate. So I think having the agility at the beginning, writing your first business case, continuing with agility, writing the second business case, continuing with agility and then waterfall, writing the third business case, and then moving to waterfall for those big ones. Because you should have. I mean, Agile is great at really highlighting where issues are. For a new product where you don't know where product market fit is, you're trying to enter as an established business a new app or a new website or looking at a new demographic of customers. I think Agile is perfect. Well, Agile combined with lean and design thinking is where I would go. You don't need to build it all, but you need to build prototypes. You need to test those quickly. You need to feed that back to the team, improve your prototypes, show it back to potential buyers and see if there's a fit. If there's a fit, then start scaling it. And then, initially stay with Agile because there'll be a lot of course correction because throughout the process. But my analogy is this. So if you take a fishing boat and a rowing boat, if you know you're going to go from point A to point B, it's a rowing boat. You've got a clear plan. You're not going to be going like this in a rowing boat. Waterfall is absolutely fine. It's going to be a tough struggle like rowers have, but it's okay. If you're not quite sure, and we've got a lot of either technical debt or we've got a lot of new business sort of challenges that we don't quite understand, it's a fishing boat. You're on choppy waters, you're course correcting, you're looking for the fish. Until you get to calm waters, you throw your nets out, you're in waterfall land now because you want to be more predictive. And that's another challenge with Agile for me. But, I could be here for another hour talking about burn down and burn up and the value they give. But then, maybe you could then bring in some predictability into your project.
That's fantastic. And of course, as you build out the feature set of CYN, we can happily have you back to talk about all those sorts of things as well. But what I thought when you're speaking, first of all, your analogy of fishing versus rowing boat is really good. I'm going to steal it. First of all, I'm going to use that in my meetings. Secondly, I think when you talked about the difference between where Agile fits and where Waterfall fits is really informative as well, especially when I look at startups and even moving into scale-ups. if you can be agile at the start, at the core, that I find to be advantageous for sure, especially when you've got people playing different roles and bootstrapping everything. I think it's the right way to go. As you grow and you start working in large organizations and enterprises, it is harder to be agile unless it's in pockets of teams. I find what it seems to be more prevalent and becoming more and more popular, of course, is scaled agile and things like the SAFe framework, because it takes the bits of many, many different areas and it covers almost all bases in terms of how do you get a large organization to move from a very slow pace of change to a bit quicker pace of change and more gradually into some agility. I find that does work, especially if you give them the opportunity to start thinking, like you said, around releasing funding iteratively, having a roadmap of change based on delivering a business outcome over a 12 or 24, whatever it is, month period, and then working through showing that value before you release the funding every quarter, for example, after every iteration. A planning increment. Those ways of working I find very valuable for large organizations as well, because it does give you the opportunity to start thinking more creatively and thinking more like a startup, because you're not having all that money up front. You're having to prove your worth for that funding so that you can actually draw down more when you've shown that you've demonstrated some value. And I think that linking with a startup as well as a larger team, larger organization trying to be more agile than they were previously, I think those values work really well and those synergies work really well. So yeah, that's my take on it. And it's good to see that. I feel that there's a place for different types of methods and it's not just a one size fits all. And it seems as though you have a similar view as well, which is great. All right. So I really want to tap into some of your leadership prowess and leadership skills. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about that. So first of all, what are the things that you wish you knew when you started out in your leadership journey? Say, for example, when you got your first CTO role or even your first program leadership role, what are the things you wish you knew beforehand that would have been really valuable for you to know?
I think it wasn't so much what I wish I knew as confidence. So I find when I started, I don't think it's this way anymore, but the technology departments used to be subservient. They used to call it the business, and the business were the people with the purse strings, and the technology department were almost like an internal outsourced company that would, deliver to business demands, and business were allowed to change their minds whenever they wanted. The technology was held to account. And I think there was a real confidence issue in technology leaders voicing their opinion. And because, just the way the culture was set up, it became a cultural issue. So I think when I started my initial CTO roles, I think it was just having more confidence in myself. Like I've got like 10 years of experience. By confidence, don't mix it up with arrogance. What I mean by confidence is having the confidence to doubt yourself, having the confidence to doubt your team, and having the confidence to doubt your leadership. Not in a bad way, but in a questioning way. Like team, hey, are we sure? Are we really sure? Because I've got a feeling in my gut that this project's going to go off kilter, but you all seem very confident. Are we really sure? What makes us so confident? And raising those questions takes confidence. The second one for me was, how do you create high-performing teams? Everybody talks about it, and it's similar to Agile versus Waterfall. There's not a cookie cutter of high-performing team. There could be, an individual who's being regarded as poor at company A, joins company B, and is a superstar because they fitted into the culture, they filtered into the ways of working, and they fitted in, their personality fits all there. So how do you build a high performing team for your own needs? And again, that leads to me, my final point is reflection. Like, do you have enough time in the day to reflect? I used to walk around, my teams, and they'd be all buzzing around, and I go, oh, what are you up to? And they go, oh no, we just got to do this QA test, or UAT is happening right now. We're on cycle 3 of UAT, and I'd go, okay, I'll leave you alone. And then I'd come back, I'd sit in my office, and then I'd reflect. I would like look at the team and seem to be rushing around. I wonder who in that team is sitting back going, is there a faster way of doing UAT? Should we use CI/CD? Should we use some of these automated testing? Who is doing that sort of reflection? So I think carving out time for reflection will make you a better leader.
Very good words there. Thank you for that. Helpful. What about the experience you've had as an NED? And I know you talked about that a little bit, asking maybe the questions that other people won't ask. What advice would you give somebody that's not in that position, but has a leadership role in terms of how they would operate to get the right things out of the team?
Right. So let me answer it in two parts, if I may, Cliff. The first part is, why are there not more digital technology data project leaders sat at the NED board in FTSE organizations? And I sort of started asking a number of headhunters. And so when I said, look, you keep ringing me, I'm full right now, but there's a lot of really good technology leaders out there. Why aren't you ringing those other technology leaders? And the answer consistently was because they're technology-led and not strategic-led. They start with the technology and then start saying, and their expertise, they start talking machine learning and NLP and predictive analytics and AWS. And they said the ones who are actually sat on board, they start with so what problem are you trying to solve questions, and how can technology play a part in that? Could be AI, could be data, could be digital transformation. So they have a very different mindset when they're sat on boards. Now, I think there's a lot of good technology leaders who are strategic, and maybe the headhunter should do a harder job in finding those individuals.
Amazing, very good responses and thoughts there. Really, really appreciate that. We could go on for much longer, but I'm mindful of your time, conscious of your time. But I'm just going to ask you if you've got anything that you want to ask me at all as a closing remark. I'm happy to answer it. Make it tough, make it challenging if you want. And this could be about projects, it could be about scaling business teams or anything like that at all that maybe you've got on your mind. If not, that's fine. But if you do, go for it.
Yeah. So I've got a question. So, I mean, I know you're a prolific reader, Cliff, and no doubt, you're reading things like Harvard Business Review, or you're reading, the latest sort of large consultancy Deloitte information, or the Standish report. That's quite a famous report. And they consistently say that 66 to 70% of technology projects, data, AI, digital, however you want to refer technology, 66% or a high portion, higher than 50%, fail. And I'd love your take on, one, do you think they've got their assessment right? Fail to deliver on the value they set off, not fail as a project, but fail to deliver on the value they set off. And I'd love to get your view, being somebody at the coalface, somebody who's done a lot of interviews on your podcast. I'd love to get your view of why that is. What's your reflections on the rationale, the reasoning behind that?
That is a good question. I do like to be challenged on these podcast shows, just to keep myself honest and keep myself occupied, so to speak. But first of all, I think that my gut feeling is that analogy or that number is probably about right. It may even be higher. And the reason why I think that is because even though we talk about agility, when you get to the board level or funding level, there's a lot of rebaselining that happens. So if you look back to a project or a work stream of activity which says we're going to deliver this outcome at this date, by the time you've gone to the end date, it's never happened at the date that they originally expected. Now, many times it's a high-level date and then it becomes refined. I also think that's one thing I think that's prevalent. I think is relatively accurate. The reasons why are manifold. I think one of the reasons is expectation management, the desire to retain funding and justify the retention of that funding, and not thinking broadly about the wider team, the wider vision. So, for example, I could be a program or delivery team within one area and may want to retain budget for my piece of work, which is totally the wrong way of thinking, knowing that there's another team that has a need for that budget as well, and they're being starved of funding. If we looked at a bigger picture, maybe as a portfolio, and worked alongside our dependent teams, we would realize that there's a potential give and take. And I'm not sure if that dependency management across delivery teams happens well enough. It's a very tough challenge. I don't think any one solution has got it right yet, or team. That's another reason. And I also think the other reason for that is the confidence to say no, or the confidence to get real. So I could go in front of my project board, my program board, or the people that are funding my initiatives, and I could say, and I could give an update, similar to what you said, that everything's rosy and hunky-dory and it's all green until it's red. What happened to Amber? What happened to all the rest of it in between? The fear of being told no and the fear of being told off, right? We need to get over that fear and be really transparent and open. One final thing I'd say, there's quite a few, but one final thing I'll say is actually not chunking up work enough. So back to being agile. If you're more iterative in what you release, and this isn't possible for all types of initiatives. If you're building a house, for example, you may have to build it or build a complex within one or two phases, right? And the house is either built or it's not. But if you're releasing a new SaaS product, it can have go-to-market functionality, which you continue to build on over time. But if you want to build that fantastic solution in one go, that may not be the right approach. Get it working first, get it tested, get it usable, and then continue to manage expectations and grow from there on in. Once you've understood what the users need, and I think we need to do more of that. And therefore, the word failure becomes a different question because our expectation is different, and failure becomes less of a word because it's more about what we're expecting over this quarter or this short period over this next 12 months. So there you go. I hope that answered your question to a degree. Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure having you on board. I'd love to catch up again with you soon at some point. I've learnt loads, and I'm going to put pinpoints in this podcast and in the notes everywhere that people can find you and your products, so I learn more about you. So it'd be great to see that. Anything else you want to say before we drop off?
No, just a big thank you. I'm more than happy for the community to reach out. As I said, it's where I started my career. I have an affinity. So any advice I can give within reason, I'm happy to do so. But thanks for the time, Cliff.
Fantastic. And so everyone, you can catch me on the podcast, of course. You can also follow the channel and follow the newsletter, which we have, which is on changeleadersplaybook.com. And you'll get more notes from this episode as well as the actual podcast itself. Other than that, looking forward to catching up with you again at the next episode. Bye for now.